Good evening. Welcome to our special coverage of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with 200 CEOs. This was the second such meeting in about a week's time, held by the Niti Aayog under the aegis of the Champions of Change program. Now, this aims to create a dialogue between the government and the private sector to zero in on areas where India Inc. can contribute to help improve governance. Addressing today's gathering, the Prime Minister told CEOs that they were his team. He also added that the government and the private sector should work together to solve the problems that India faces. Let's first listen in to the Prime Minister, then we'll get you ringside reactions to what really went on.
मेरे लिए आप मेरी टीम है। मेरे देश को आगे ले जाने के लिए मुझे आपका साथ चाहिए। मैं और आप कंधे से कंधा मिला करके काम करें और ये तब होगा जब हमारा मीटिंग ऑफ माइंड होगा। आपकी सोच मेरी योजना का हिस्सा बने, मेरी सोच आपके पुरुषार्थ का एक आधार बन जाए। आप देखिए कैसा बड़ा बदलाव आ सकता है। अब हम कम कैश सोसाइटी की ओर जाना चाहते हैं। आप मुझे बताइए, आपकी कंपनियां 2022 देश को यहां ले जाने के लिए एक काम, हमारा पूरा कारोबार, हमारे एम्प्लॉय का भी पूरा कारोबार, यानी ऐसा नहीं कि उसको हम ई पेमेंट दे देंगे और बाद में वो कैश निकाल करके कारोबार करेगा, ऐसा नहीं। उसको भी हम सिखाएंगे कि तुम भीम ऐप डाउनलोड करो और तुम अपने मोबाइल फ़ोन से, और वहाँ पे छोटे मोटे व्यापारी होंगे उनको भी सिखाएंगे कि तुम भी भीम ऐप डाउनलोड करो। और हमारे यहाँ कोई ऐसा नहीं होगा कि जब कैश ट्रांजैक्शन करेगा। मुझे बताइए, देश की सेवा होगी कि नहीं होगी? सरकार ने एक छोटा सा प्लेटफॉर्म बनाया है, जेम, GEM। आपसे मेरा सबसे आग्रह है कि आप उस पोर्टल पे जाइए, चेक कीजिए। और सरकार के सभी डिपार्टमेंट अपनी रिक्वायरमेंट उस पर लिखते हैं कि हमें ये चीज़ चाहिए। और सरकार का नियम बना है कि उसमें जो क्वालिटी कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ किए बिना सस्ता जो है उसको लेना है। 1000 करोड़ रुपयों का सरकार का परचेज इस जेम के द्वारा हुआ है, 1000 करोड़ रुपीस। और सप्लायर कितने हैं? आप चौंक जाएंगे। 28,000 सप्लायर्स ने मिलकर के 1000 करोड़ का दिया है जी। यही 1000 करोड़ का माल अगर पुरानी सरकार की टेंडरिंग सिस्टम से हुआ होता तो शायद पेमेंट 1700 करोड़ का हुआ होता, और 1000 करोड़ में से क्या आया होता भगवान जाने।
Well, that's the Prime Minister there speaking at the end of a two-day meeting between CEOs of India Inc. and the Niti Aayog to understand what the private sector can do to alleviate and nurture growth. Joining us now, Rajiv Memani, country head of EY India. Also with us, Udayan Malhotra of Dynamatic Technologies, both part of that meeting. Rajiv, let me start by asking you, this is the second meeting in less than a week. The first one, we saw startup CEOs meet with the Prime Minister, and today, youngish CEOs, if I can call it that, were meeting with the Prime Minister. Take us through what really went on. What is the action agenda that's been drawn up at the end of this two-day meeting?
Thanks, Shireen. I think it was a very engaging, day and a half. And I think what the Niti Aayog did very well under the aegis of the Prime Minister's office was to really allocate subjects and broke the groups into 6 broad halves. And they came up with their suggestions with a clear idea of saying what the private sector could do more than really asking the government. And each of the groups made a 10-minute presentation to the Prime Minister and his team, really identifying some of the suggestions, and some suggestions say around Make in India, on how could Make in India move more rapidly, some more radical thoughts trying to say, okay, how can we create a digital exchange for land and things like that. So, and a lot of emphasis one saw, and some things that came out was a lot of emphasis on tourism sector, as it has great potential for job creation, great potential for exports, great potential for engaging the rural and semi-urban India. A lot of emphasis on healthcare. I think that also came out very, very clearly. Again, for similar reasons, a lot of emphasis on manufacturing, especially also on electronic components and things like that. So I think a lot of areas were identified on hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure in areas like that.
I don't mean to take anything away from this day-and-a-half meeting, Rajiv, but the point is that, you know, this is stuff that we already know. These are sectors that have been identified, you know, in healthcare, tourism, and so on and so forth. But is there anything specific? Are there any specific timelines that what has been identified today by way of ideas, crowdsourced from the private sector, will actually be taken forward?
I think there were 2 or 3 objectives. I think the first thing, I think from a Prime Minister's standpoint, was I think he wanted to engage with a large cross-section of industry, of young CEOs and others. Secondly, I think he wanted them to think on issues outside of their own interests, so that to get their thinking and the thinking of the Prime Minister and the government aligned, and I think he was very successful in that. I think third was whatever suggestions were given were very specific suggestions, or most of them, I would say, were pretty specific suggestions with clear timelines. You know, so if on the tourism sector, there was a very specific suggestion that identifying some clusters, identifying coastal SEZ, some areas, specifically how they could, that could be done. In the healthcare sector, it was to say at the district level, for example, if there were specific, you know, hospitals and others, if they could go through PPP projects, again with a timeline, what the private sector would contribute in that. So I would say some of the suggestions had very specific, had a lot of specificity. Some of them probably could not have specificity, but had a lot of had good ideas. So I think it is a great way to engage. I'm sure some of these things will be taken up over a period of time. Some will just fall by the way as it happens.
Well, that of course is the natural course of things. But Rajiv, just hang in there. I've got 2 of the other CEOs who were part of that meeting also joining in now. Vinod Dasari of Ashok Leyland and Udayan Malhotra of Dynamatics Technologies. Vinod, thanks very much for joining in. I understand that you were part of the Make in India group, one of the 6 groups that was identified to come up with specific ideas and solutions on how the private sector could contribute. Take me through what were the specific suggestions made by your group, and what is the expectation now in terms of action from here on?
4 major headings. One was what can we do to create more jobs, which was how do we make Indian companies globally competitive. That included things like how do we enhance the R&D spend of the private industry, and how can the government go back to a 200% tax benefit on R&D. I'm just giving you that as an example. The second one was how do we do specialization and provide for income enhancement by doing more design, more value addition in India. The third was how do we build successful brands globally and use that for exporting more. And the fourth one was about what are the things that the government can help us with ease of doing business in India. I think, first of all, rather than say that the exact timeline or specific marker or as to a metric, this was more to say, for the first time, I think the business community, rather than sit on the side of saying that this is wrong, this is what's wrong with the government, business actually sat as if they were sitting in the chair of the government and saying this is what we will do. And this is what the private companies will do, and this is what we expect the government to do. There was not a single time when the private industry said, please give me some specific SOP for my industry or for my company. Nobody even mentioned that. It was brilliant to see that.
Well, that's a refreshing change, I have to say.
To see that people working together. Hello?
Vinod Dasari, they're saying that industry was not asking for SOPs, not really asking for government intervention specifically, which is usually what these things turn out to be. Industry was in fact giving ideas on what the government should do and what the industry itself can do. But let me bring in Udayan into the conversation as well. Udayan, you know, the number one idea that you believe was crowdsourced from this particular meeting, this day-and-a-half-long interaction and engagement, that has the potential to have a multiplier impact?
Yeah, hi, Shireen. Firstly, it was quite extraordinary because you had the Prime Minister and all the major ministers, the secretaries, all sitting right in front of us. It was exceedingly well governed in terms of breaking us into different visionary groups, having breakout sessions, ideating, and then coming with very clear ideas for governance and asks of the government. And we had a very patient hearing. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was one single statement of the Prime Minister, and that was that, listen, you guys run great businesses. You all keep sitting in your silos, and obviously you all know a lot. And I'm sure that you all feel that if the government far away isn't listening to you or doesn't understand what you need. So we are here. We want to understand what it is. And in being part of this process, you also understand the limits we have as government. And I can see that in the questions. Your questions have been very nuanced and very responsible. And I thought that was quite exceptional in terms of inclusiveness of a group outside of government. And finally, why 2022? I thought it was quite a nice vision to have. He said that's the 75th anniversary of independence. Let's just have on this missionary zeal and bring on a second kind of independence for India, and independence of poverty, from poverty and from a lot of the afflictions that we have. And let's work together. So I thought it was great.
All right, Deep Kalra of Make My Trip also joins in. Deep, thanks very much. I understand that the meeting has just concluded a few minutes ago. Deep, you know, because you're in Delhi, you happen to be a part of a lot of these government exercises that are called upon from time to time. But what would you say has been different about this one, and what would your hope be? Well, we'll get back to Deep, but Rajiv, let me put that question to you because it applies to you as well, since you do manage to spend a lot of time in these sessions that are organized by government. What is your hope on how this can be different? Well, we seem to have lost that line with Rajiv, can you hear me? We seem to have lost that line with Rajiv. The jammers are still at work there in the venue, which is where all of these gentlemen are joining us. Vinod Dasari, let me check in with you. I hope we still have you on the air. Vinod, are you still there?
Yes, I'm there.
Yes, so let me ask you then, Vinod, what would your expectation realistically be? Because, you know, we've seen at different forums, perhaps this was done differently because it was crowdsourcing of ideas from the private sector. But, you know, realistically, what would your expectation be if this were to be termed as a successful engagement?
I'd say, you know, it's not what came out, but how the process was. For the first time, you've had a large gathering of industry CEOs and a few days earlier with entrepreneurs to crowdsource ideas on how to take India forward at a much faster rate. And I think the next steps, I assume, will be that smaller subgroups will be formed or something else will happen where they will try to flesh out these ideas into more detail, and hopefully some of them will become policy changes sometime in the near future.
Okay, Deep, back with us. Deep, what would your hope be in terms of the policy changes that we could see emerge from the crowdsourcing of ideas that's happened over the past day and a half at this meeting of young CEOs?
Yeah, Shireen, sorry about getting dropped off. But, so I think what was very heartening was to see that the government was being receptive at all levels, including all the deliberations over 24 hours, and industry came back with a lot of specific policy recommendations. And actually, all we could see was PM listening intently, FM listening intently, and a lot of the other ministers and secretaries actually taking notes. And then, of course, in his own inimitable way, recounting some of this and saying, you know, some of these policy changes can indeed make a big difference. And he also commented on some other policy changes they've done recently from good ideas that they've got. So we are very hopeful that while we can't say what specifically will be done, but there was a good point on doubling farmers' income and some of the things which need to be done around that, a kind of a special cell to be set up. And I think they were quite receptive because he was actually recounting some of those. Similarly, for urban cities and for logistics planning, there were some pretty interesting ideas put forward, which were to leverage technology, which was to leverage AI. And I think what we hear them say is that, these are things which we definitely have to look into as we are planning, and we will come back and engage further with each one of them. So, yeah, we are very hopeful. I think every CEO is left here with full of optimism. So, but time will tell, but very optimistic.
Okay, so let me end then by asking each one of you what you thought was the best idea. And I know that Rajiv Memani was just explaining to us how this process was run with 6 groups, the 200 CEOs being divided across 6 groups and then making individual presentations group-wise to the Prime Minister. So Deep, let me start by asking you the single biggest idea, the best idea that you heard this afternoon.
Okay, I'm biased towards our own group, but frankly, I think there was an idea around transit-oriented development, which is for new cities, how one will plan logistics for them, and really the hub and spoke, but more importantly, the last mile, or technically the last 500 to 800 meters, being made friendly to walk, and other parts being made friendly to cycle. So I thought that was very impactful, and hopefully we'll see some of our new emerging cities on this model.
Okay, so smart mobility, urban mobility, transit-oriented, last-mile connectivity ideas is what Deep is betting on. Rajiv Memani, the biggest and the best idea for you
I think
at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of ideas around land, digital exchange of land, creating a digital exchange of land and how that impacts, whether it's mortgage financing, whether it's improving agricultural income, whether it's farmers using land for, giving out land for to subtenants and everything else. I thought that, once digitization of records, which is happening, but if you can create a land exchange after that, then I think it does create a lot of flexibility. So I think that was an interesting idea. But I think as a sector, it seems that tourism receives the maximum amount of importance. So that is also interesting.
Okay, tourism got the maximum importance. Udayant Malhotra, the big idea for you from this day-and-a-half event?
There's been a lot of digitization that's taken place in recent times, and the whole concept of, literally folding together various current processes of approvals within different arms of the government, putting them together, digitizing them, making them as efficient as, for example, getting a passport today, which used to take weeks, now takes 2 days. Similarly, a lot of applications in life which deal with government for citizens or for companies be similarly folded into a few days or a few hours by digitization. I thought that was very nice. And we had a very interested audience in the government for everything we proposed.
Okay, so more digitization, at least when it comes to government services. Vinod Dasari, I'll end by asking you your number one idea from this.
I think we took the Make in India entire theme and we first changed the thing to say Make Invaluable India, which was like a play of words, but it basically meant that how do we do much more value addition in India? That translated to how do we do design in India? Because this will result in substantially higher paying jobs. And for that, the industry said that they will create a structured apprenticeship program. So I think that from there flowed a whole bunch of good ideas along the same stream.
Okay, so much more value addition as part of Make in India. So not just Make in India, but design and develop in India as well. Rajiv Memani, Udayant Malhotra, Vinod Dasari and Deep Kalra, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18 and giving us a ringside view of what went on in that meeting that the Prime Minister has had over the last 2 days with, and I'm calling them young-ish CEOs because the gentlemen here with us are certainly a little more than the young Turk bracket that we're used to, but appreciate you joining us here on the program. Thanks very much. We are going to take a break, but the other big story when we return, we'll talk about President Trump's address where he chalks out his new policy for South Asia, goes after Pakistan and brings up the trade deficit with India as well.